This is a video about the well-known global warming pause. Before we begin, my name is Ben Davidson and I'm the director of the Mobile Observatory Project. We have multiple ongoing research lines in space weather, geology, plasma physics, and electrical phenomenon. We also do a daily update on all things space weather related and are on tour across the land having meet and greets, lectures, and other special events. Now, despite the global warming pause and the information here, this speaker does not advocate deregulation. Pollution is poison. The climate is changing. And we need to know what the scientists know, but which our media won't seem to tell us. Meet the head of the International Panel on Climate Change. And while guarded in the implication of his words, he and every other scientist on Earth now concedes global temperatures have not gone up for nearly 2 decades. Even before these revelations, the record of lead authors and contributors quitting in protest of the IPCC was already loaded. Here, we see the temperature variation according to NASA in red and the European data in green. It shows the plateau of late and what is actually a slight, tiny little cooling trend for more than a decade now. As CO2 has risen exponentially, the questions keep coming, which is one of the reasons we made the climate change series. Advocates of human-caused global warming are calling the pause an anomaly and call anyone who questions their failing mathematical models a denier. Those opposed to the global warming position appear to be advocating on economic greed rather than pursuit for scientific truth, and worse yet, they mostly claim there is no climate problem. This series takes neither of those positions. Part of our regular updates checks in on temperature records for the United States and the world, using data updated by the day from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and recently, the website What's Up With That published a review of this material for 2014 thus far. The compilations appear to show a continued trend of increasing cold events, far outpacing heat. The science says one thing, the media says another. In our speech at EU 2014, we began by discussing the 97% consensus on climate change, suggesting that the work appeared to only claim that humans had some effect on climate change, something with which even most skeptics do not agree. Recently, the Global Warming Policy Foundation did a more thorough examination of the consensus and came to precisely the same conclusion. If you ask me, that number should be 100%. Every input into a system has an effect on the outcome, and for any scientist to deny this is baffling. But given that the models have failed for almost 2 decades and have focused on pollution and deforestation as the main cause, perhaps we should look for the part of the story that we're missing. Let's clear up some things. First, Arctic sea ice is technically below the long-term average during our time of observation, but we have seen a tremendous rebound of late. The current ice extent is not only above the record lows, it is above many of the ice extents measured during the satellite age. Science says one thing, the media says another. The Antarctic sea ice is an even more surprising story. The record high southern ice marks were shattered all throughout 2013, and so far in 2014, we have either matched those records or set new ones. The science says one thing, the media says another, like that there is runaway melting in the Antarctic. However, if you pay attention, that applies only to the western sheet. And as we begin discovering the enormous volcanoes directly beneath the heat, the media has finally acknowledged that the lone piece that was melting down south has nothing to do with global warming. We've recently seen indisputable proof that NASA and NOAA have changed their data, fiddled with it to show warming trends that were actually not there, and recently we learned that the Australian government did the exact same thing. Joanne Nova is one of the best bloggers on the climate change topic, and her expose of the manipulation and excuses is outstanding. A cooling trend magically becomes a warming trend, and the only possible avenue of explanation from the government is classified. When ClimateGate occurred, those leaked emails discussing how they would manipulate the climate data to propel the global warming story, I was certain that people would wake up. But an enormous spin campaign and some academically laughable excuses flooded the internet and the airwaves. When it was revealed that Al Gore stood to make a ridiculous fortune on his proposed carbon swaps, I was sure people would see the conflict of interest, but I was wrong. So when the second round of leaked emails showed a far deeper and more troubling story to the ClimateGate issue, I was no longer surprised to find a lack of caring. Guys, I hate pollution just like you, but lying to ourselves and each other is just not the way to go about making a better world. We don't need excuses to make a better planet, we should just want to do it. And our use of the climate story might end up disastrous. In addition to one side trying to say there is not a problem, the advocates of climate science have astonishingly not made a single attempt to integrate cold into their story. Instead, they try to explain away the pause, but a lack of coordination among them has caused timeline after timeline to be pushed back, now all the way to 2025. So now they don't have to explain their failure for at least another 10 years. How convenient. The worst part is that now more than a dozen climate excuses purporting to explain the pause are lacking any interest in the sun. The IPCC in modern climate science claims we can only look at ultraviolet energy from our star, which makes the sun look insignificant with only a 0.1% variation to the 11-year solar sunspot cycle. However, the extreme ultraviolet energy can vary by a factor of 10, and the individual maximum activity points of the sunspot cycle can have phenomenal variability. Space weather, how the Sun-Earth connections work, are the primary focus of the climate change series. We've now seen dozens of studies in just the last few years proving the solar effect on sudden stratospheric warmings, on jet stream blocking, on quasi-biennial oscillation, on polar vortex patterns, lightning modulation, tropospheric temperatures, and even wind speed. And they keep coming. On a global, regional, and local level, we can add atmospheric pressure and the gradients between high and low to that list of solar-affected weather. We've also provided a link to an excellent expose on how the sun drives the climate, along with a PDF from the CIA that goes back to the 70s, showing how long the government has known that the warming would end in favor of colder climates, similar to what happened hundreds of years ago when famine and drought accompanied the worst period of the last mini-ice age. If you can bring yourself to look back past 1880, the time the IPCC says climate science begins, back that far to the last mini-ice age, the connection with the sun is so clear that a child can understand it. And they do. At this point, there are literally hundreds of students who have commented on the stark connection between the sun and the climate if you're willing to look back to the last mini-ice age. The space weather effect described in the climate change series is this. The grand solar cycle is resetting now. The lack of warming may last a lot longer than till 2025, and it may be such that we do see another mini-ice age. The current interglacial period has gone on for quite some time now. Just because the climate isn't warming anymore doesn't mean climate change isn't a problem. And just because human imperfection reared its ugly head the last 2 decades is no reason to keep poisoning the planet. So ask yourself, are you an advocate or are you an observer?